Marcus Calloway ruled every room he entered, 41 years old, billionaire CEO, feared, admired. But today, the boardroom felt colder. He clicked the remote. The presentation screen lit up, and the name that appeared froze him where he stood. Clark Technologies. Underneath it, CEO and founder, Simone Clark. The woman he'd divorced 5 years ago. The woman he'd erased from every company record. The woman who'd built his empire with her bare hands. Now she was back. Not to forgive. Not to remember. To merge. And every man in that room was about to learn that the future of Calloway Technologies now belonged to the woman he'd made invisible. Because Simone Clark didn't come for closure. She came for control. And in 24 hours, she'll make him choose his company or his pride. Hello, family. Welcome back to Mr. Harrington Stories. May your week be filled with the courage to rise after betrayal. Because that's what this story is about. The kind of betrayal that doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your history. Your identity. Everything you built with your own hands. I want you to type present in the comments if you believe the truth always comes back around. No matter how long it takes. No matter how deep someone tries to bury it. The truth has a way of surfacing. Of demanding to be seen. And if you stand for justice over pride, if you believe that people who silence others should never have the last word, hit that subscribe button. Because the ones who erase people from their stories, they never subscribe to channels about accountability. Simone Clark stood at her office window, 17 floors above a city that had learned to say her name. Morning light turned the skyline into something almost forgivable, glass and steel stretching toward a horizon where empires were built in boardrooms instead of battlefields. This was her kingdom now. Clark Technologies. 3 floors. 200 employees. A valuation that made investors salivate and competitors desperate. She'd built it with nothing but stolen code samples, a settlement check that insulted everything she'd given, and rage refined into strategy. She'd built it alone. And that was exactly the point. The merger documents sat centered on her minimalist desk, edges perfectly aligned. She'd reviewed them twice already, though she'd memorized every clause weeks ago. The terms were surgical. They would force Marcus Calloway to negotiate like she was his equal. Like she'd always been his equal. Even when he'd convinced her to disappear. Her hand moved to the bottom drawer, a habit she despised, a weakness she couldn't quite kill. Beneath forgotten contracts and business cards from people who no longer mattered, the photograph waited. Creased. Faded from being held too many times in moments of doubt. Her and Marcus. 7 years ago, sitting on the floor of that cramped apartment, laptops balanced on their knees, takeout containers scattered like casualties of ambition. In the photo, she was laughing. He was looking at her like she held every answer he'd ever needed. Back when his promises still had weight. Simone's finger traced the edge. Just for a second. Just long enough to remember what it felt like to believe in forever. Then she closed the drawer. Locked it. Some wounds don't heal, you just learn to build around them. Her office door opened. Michelle, her assistant, sharp, efficient, loyal in ways Simone had learned to value above brilliance, stood holding her tablet with an expression that meant the carefully constructed day had just fractured. Ms. Clark. Marcus Calloway is here. Simone's hand stilled on the drawer. Our meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. Michelle's eyes flickered with something between concern and curiosity. He says it can't wait. He's in the lobby. Unannounced. There it was. The opening move in a chess game Simone had been planning for 5 years. Marcus arriving on her territory, on her time, trying to reclaim control the only way he knew how, by disrupting hers. She almost smiled. Tell him 10 minutes. Conference room B. Not my office. Michelle nodded and disappeared. The door clicked shut with a sound like a starting gun. He was here. After 5 years of calculated silence. 5 years of watching her rise through industry rankings while his empire leaked value through patent wars he couldn't win. 5 years of knowing exactly where she was but never once reaching out. Now he needed something. And that changed everything. 7 years ago, Simone lived in a studio apartment where ambition went to prove itself or die trying. 1 room. A kitchen that was really a hot plate and optimism. A bathroom where the shower and sink negotiated for water pressure. But it had been hers. And more importantly, it had been theirs. 3 in the morning. The hour when night surrenders to something lonelier. Marcus paced by the window, rehearsing his investor pitch until his voice cracked. His tie hung loose. His hair curled the way it did when stress overwhelmed product. Simone sat at her desk, a folding table from a hardware store, writing code that would eventually rewrite the rules of data encryption. Her eyes burned from screen light. Her spine ached from a chair she'd rescued from someone's curb. But her mind was electric with possibility. She was building something that would matter. Marcus stopped pacing, moved behind her chair and watched the code flow across her screen like poetry in a language only they could read. "You're a genius, you know that?" She'd laughed, exhaustion making everything sharper. "Tell that to the computer. It keeps arguing with me." He'd leaned down then, kissed the crown of her head, the gesture so gentle, so full of reverence that Simone felt it crack open something dangerous in her chest. That warmth that made you believe in words like partnership and forever. "We're going to change the world together," he'd whispered. "Equal partners. Your brain, my pitch, our vision. No one gets left behind." She'd turned in her chair, looked up at eyes bright with certainty, with a future close enough to taste. "Promise?" Marcus took her hand, threaded his fingers through hers like a vow. "I promise. Once we make it, everyone will know your name." She'd kissed him then. Let herself believe that promises made at 3 a.m. were the kind that survived daylight. Love makes you ignore red flags you'd spot instantly in anyone else's story. The dinner happened 2 weeks later at Marcus's family estate. The kind of old money that made you understand wealth wasn't about having things. It was about never having to think about not having them. Marble floors. Oil paintings of ancestors who'd owned people. A dining room table that seated 20 but made Simone feel infinitely small. She'd worn her best dress. Practiced smiling in the mirror. Told herself that if Marcus's parents could see how much she loved their son, how brilliant she was, how real their partnership, they'd understand. She'd been 27. Still young enough to believe merit outweighed melanin. Richard Calloway sat at the table's head like a king who'd never learned the monarchy had ended. Silver hair. Shop suit. Eyes that assessed value the way jewelers graded stones, quickly, coldly, without sentiment. Marcus had been nervous. Simone could tell by the water glass he kept refilling, by his hand finding hers under the table, by the way he laughed too hard at his father's calculated jokes. She'd squeezed his hand, tried to transmit without words that it would be okay. She'd been wrong. Richard waited until dessert, until the staff vanished. Until the silence felt like its own entity. "Marcus tells me you've been helping with the technical side." Simone smiled, professional, warm, prepared. "I've been developing the core algorithms, the security protocols, the AI integration that makes the entire platform viable." Richard nodded, sipped wine that probably cost more than her rent. "Impressive. I'm sure your contributions will be valuable as the company grows." Something in his tone made her skin prickle. However, that word hung in the air like a verdict. As we move forward, investor meetings, public launches, brand building, we need to think carefully about optics, about presentation, about who represents this company in rooms that matter. Marcus's hand went rigid in hers. "Dad." Richard raised one finger. The gesture was small but absolute. "This is business, son. Not personal. The venture capital world is traditional, conservative. They invest in people they recognize. And a black woman as the face of a tech startup." He paused. Let the silence articulate what his words wouldn't. "It's a risk investors won't take seriously." Something cracked in Simone's chest. Not a break. Not yet. Just a fissure that would widen until there was nothing left to hold. She looked at Marcus. Waited for him to defend her. To tell his father she wasn't a risk. She was the reason there was a company to invest in at all. Marcus opened his mouth. And hesitated. Just a second. Maybe less. The kind of pause that in any other moment would dissolve into nothing. But in that dining room, with his father's expectations pressing down and Simone's heart suspended between them, that hesitation was everything. She watched him calculate. Weigh her against his father's approval. Measure her brilliance against his family's comfort. She watched him choose. "Just until we make it," Marcus said quietly, his hand squeezing hers like an apology wrapped in barbed wire. Once we secure funding, once we're established, everything changes. But right now, we need their money. Simone wanted to stand. To leave. To tell them both where they could put their compromise. But she loved him. And love made her stay. Made her nod. Made her believe temporary invisibility was the price of eventual partnership. Okay. Just until we make it. Richard smiled, the kind that never reached his eyes. Good. I'm glad you're reasonable. Marcus said you were smart. The next 3 years unfolded like slow drowning. Simone working 18-hour days in a back office while Marcus stood in boardrooms presenting her innovations as his own. Her code, his credit. Her brilliance, his Bloomberg interviews. Her sleepless nights, his Forbes profile. She told herself it was temporary. That he'd keep his promise. That love and partnership could survive beneath layers of lies if the foundation was strong enough. She'd been catastrophically wrong. The charity gala shattered everything. One of those events where San Francisco's elite wrote checks to feel virtuous while wearing jewelry worth more than most people earned in a year. Simone attended as Marcus's girlfriend. Not his partner. Not his co-founder. His accessory. She wore red. Did her hair the way he preferred. Practiced the smile she'd learned for rooms where she wasn't welcome but was expected to be grateful anyway. Then she saw him. Marcus at the bar, laughing with a woman Simone didn't recognize. Blonde. Effortless elegance. The kind that came from generations of country clubs and inherited confidence. Victoria Sinclair. Old money. Venture capital connections. A surname that opened doors Marcus had been pounding on for 3 years. Simone watched him lean in. Watched him whisper something that made Victoria laugh. That practiced, pretty laugh of women who'd never had to fight for space. Watched his hand settle on Victoria's lower back with devastating familiarity. Then he kissed her. Right there in the middle of the gala, in the middle of the crowd, in the middle of Simone's chest splitting open. The engagement announcement came an hour later. Marcus Calloway and Victoria Sinclair. Simone stood in that ballroom in her red dress, surrounded by people celebrating a man she'd built, watching him choose someone else. Again. The divorce papers arrived the next morning via a lawyer in a suit worth more than Simone made in a month. The settlement was an insult wrapped in legal language, a fraction of what she'd earned, created, sacrificed. Marcus's attorneys were efficient. Clinical. They outlined terms like they were dissecting something already dead. Simone read every page. Then signed without trembling. She didn't cry. Didn't beg. Didn't ask to see Marcus one more time to hear him explain how temporary became permanent, how partnership became theft, how love became absolutely nothing. She simply stood to leave. At the door, she paused. Looked back at Marcus sitting at that conference table, his lawyers flanking him like guards protecting something precious. You'll regret this. Marcus didn't look up. I already don't. That was the moment Simone Clark died. And someone fiercer was born. 5 years later, she'd built Clark Technologies from nothing but rage and receipts. Every email she'd kept. Every timestamp proving authorship. Every piece of evidence that Marcus's empire was built on her genius. She'd worked 100-hour weeks. Leveraged every connection she'd made while invisible. Turned her pain into patents and her heartbreak into leverage. Now she sat in conference room B, hands folded, heartbeat steady. Waiting. The door opened. Marcus Calloway walked in looking like a man who just realized he'd bet on the wrong hand. If you were her, if someone erased you from your own story, then reappeared 5 years later needing what only you could give, would you have walked away quietly? Or would you have done exactly what Simone was about to do? Make him remember. Make him pay. Make him understand that some people don't stay buried. They rise. Marcus walked into conference room be like a man trying to remember how power felt. Expensive suit. Confident stride. But Simone could see it, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when his eyes found hers across the table. He was nervous. And trying desperately not to show it. She didn't stand. Didn't smile. Just watched him cross the room with the same cool assessment she'd give any opponent. Because that's what he was now. Not the man who'd kissed her forehead at 3 a.m. Not the man who'd promised her the world and delivered betrayal instead. Just another CEO who needed something he couldn't get anywhere else. "Marcus," she said, her voice perfectly measured. "You're early." He stopped at the opposite end of the table. Didn't sit. His fingers drummed once against the leather portfolio he carried, a tell she remembered from the old days when negotiations weren't going his way. "We need to talk. About the merger." Simone tilted her head slightly. "We have a meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. with lawyers present. With your board. Unless you'd prefer to negotiate terms privately?" Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Or desperation dressed up as strategy. "I'd prefer to talk to you. Not the CEO. You." Simone. She almost laughed. After 5 years, he was trying to use intimacy as leverage. As if history could be weaponized into advantage. As if she hadn't spent every one of those years building immunity to exactly this. "I am the CEO, Marcus. That's who you're talking to. That's who you'll be negotiating with. And that's who's about to make your next 5 years very interesting." He set the portfolio down. Leaned forward, hands braced against the conference table. "You can't do this." The words hung between them like a challenge he didn't have the cards to back up. Simone stood then. Slowly. Moved to the window where sunlight turned the glass into something sharp and unforgiving. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "Watch me." 2 words. Calm as a death sentence. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. This wasn't the Simone who'd signed divorce papers in silence. This wasn't the woman who'd believed his promises about temporary and soon and once we make it. This was someone who'd learned that power wasn't given. It was taken. And held. And used with surgical precision. "You have leverage I don't even know about yet, don't you?" His voice had dropped to something quieter. Something that almost sounded like respect. Simone turned from the window. Met his eyes with a kind of certainty that came from playing a long game while your opponent was still figuring out the rules. "I have everything, Marcus. Every email. Every timestamp. Every piece of proof that your empire was built on my genius while you collected the credit. So when you walk into that meeting at 2 p.m., remember something." She moved closer. Close enough that he could see the woman he'd loved buried somewhere beneath the armor she'd built. "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to make you remember what it feels like when someone more powerful decides your fate. When someone who knows all your secrets holds them like a blade. When someone you underestimated becomes the only person who can save you." She paused. "Let that sink in." "So yes, Marcus. I can do this. The question is, can you survive it?" 30 blocks away, Victoria Sinclair stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows in a penthouse that money had bought but elegance had decorated. The television played on mute, financial news, market updates, the kind of background noise the wealthy used to feel connected to the world they controlled. Then Simone Clark's face appeared on screen. Victoria's champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. The headline scrolled beneath the image. Clark Technologies merger could reshape tech industry. She set down the glass. Picked up the remote. Unmuted. The reporter's voice filled the penthouse like an unwelcome guest. Sources close to the deal suggest Simone Clark, founder and CEO of Clark Technologies, is in advanced talks with Callaway Technologies. The merger would create a powerhouse in AI and cloud security, with Clark potentially taking a controlling position in the combined entity. Victoria watched the screen. Watched Simone speak at some tech conference, commanding the stage with the kind of confidence Victoria recognized because she'd spent her whole life performing it. But there was something different about Simone's version. It wasn't performance. It was earned. She turned off the television. The silence felt heavy. Intentional. Victoria had known about Simone. Of course she had. You didn't marry a man without researching who he'd loved before. Who he'd divorced. What ghosts he carried into your bed at night. But Victoria had assumed she was dealing with a discarded ex-wife. Someone bitter and broken and safely in the past. This woman on television, polished, powerful, strategic, was none of those things. Victoria moved to Marcus's study. He'd left this morning in a rush, barely kissed her goodbye, his mind already somewhere else. Somewhere he thought she couldn't see. His laptop sat on the desk. Closed but not locked. Marcus had always been careless about things he thought didn't matter. Things like passwords. Like privacy. Like wives who paid attention. She opened it. The browser history loaded like a confession. Page after page after page. All from the last 3 months. Simone Clark keynote speech. Simone Clark interview Forbes. Clark Technologies valuation. Simone Clark worth. Simone Clark photos. Victoria scrolled. Kept scrolling. Found video links he'd watched at 2 a.m. while she slept in the next room. Articles he'd read about Simone's charity work, her innovation awards, her rise from nothing to everything. He'd been obsessed. Quietly. Carefully. The way men are obsessed when they've realized they made the wrong choice, but are too proud to admit it. Victoria closed the laptop. Stood in the study that smelled like leather and expensive cologne and lies dressed up as ambition. She wasn't threatened. Threat implied emotion. Fear. Jealousy. Victoria didn't do jealous. She did strategic. If Marcus wanted Simone back, and that browser history screamed that he did, Victoria would make sure it cost him everything. His reputation. His company. His carefully constructed image of the tech visionary who'd built an empire from scratch. Because Victoria knew something Simone probably didn't. Marcus's empire wasn't just built on stolen code. It was built on fraud. On patents filed under false pretenses. On intellectual property that belonged to someone who'd signed it away without reading the fine print hidden in divorce settlements. And if that came out, if someone with resources and motivation decided to dig into exactly how Marcus Calloway had become Marcus Calloway, it would all crumble. Victoria picked up her phone. Dialed a number she kept for moments exactly like this. A private investigator who specialized in the kind of research that didn't appear in public records. The call connected on the second ring. I need everything you have on Simone Clark. Everything. Financial records. Business dealings. Where she's vulnerable. How she built Clark Technologies. And I need it yesterday. She hung up without waiting for confirmation. Investigators who wanted to keep working for people like Victoria didn't waste time on questions. She poured herself fresh champagne. Returned to the window where the city sprawled below like something conquerable. Marcus thought he was playing chess with Simone. He had no idea Victoria had already started moving pieces he couldn't see. The first official merger meeting happened in Calloway Technologies' largest boardroom, the one reserved for investors and acquisitions and moments that made or broke companies. 20 people around a table built from wood older than most of their careers. Marcus sat at the head. His board flanked him, CFO, COO, General Counsel, VP of Operations. All of them expensive. All of them nervous. Simone entered with just 2 people. Her CFO and her attorney. She didn't need an army. She had something better. She had the truth. The presentations began cordially. Market analysis. Synergy potential. Combined valuation projections. The kind of corporate theater that turned billions into bullet points. Then Simone stood. She moved to the screen at the front of the room. Connected her laptop. The presentation title appeared, Partnership Terms and Intellectual Property Clarification. Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. Simone's voice was calm. Professional. The kind of tone you'd use to discuss quarterly earnings, not to detonate someone's entire legacy. Before we discuss merger terms, I think it's important we establish accurate authorship of the core technologies that make Calloway's platform valuable. She clicked to the next slide. 3 patent numbers appeared. These 3 patents, representing cloud data encryption, AI-driven security protocols, and adaptive firewall architecture, are listed under Marcus Calloway as the inventor. They form the foundation of Calloway Technologies' primary revenue streams. Marcus's general counsel leaned forward. Is there a dispute about the patent filings, Ms. Clark? Simone smiled. Not exactly. I'm simply providing clarification. Another click. The screen split. On one side, the official patent filings dated 5 years ago, Marcus's name in the inventor field. On the other side, lines of code with metadata timestamps. These are the original algorithm designs. Written between 7 and 6 years ago. Before these patents were filed. Before Calloway Technologies even existed as a legal entity. She let that breathe. Let the board members start doing math in their heads. You'll notice the timestamps on the original code. You'll notice the digital signature on each file. And you'll notice whose name appears in the authorship metadata. Simone advanced the slide. The metadata expanded, crystal clear. Author, Simone Clark. I have these files backed up in 3 separate secure locations. I have email chains where I discussed these innovations with Marcus before we were married. I have witness statements from developers who worked with early versions of this code when I was still consulting for Callaway. The room had gone silent. Marcus's board was staring at him like he'd just admitted to embezzlement. Simone's voice didn't change. Didn't get louder or sharper or emotional. I'm not interested in a legal battle over patents, gentlemen. I'm interested in accurate representation. So here are the merger terms I'm proposing. Clark Technologies acquires 51% controlling interest in Callaway. I take the CEO position. Marcus remains as CTO, Chief Technology Officer, where he can do what he actually does well, which is present other people's innovations to investors. She closed her laptop. Looked directly at Marcus. Or we can go to court. I can file for patent fraud. I can request forensic audits of every line of code Callaway has shipped in 5 years. I can make this very public and very ugly. Your choice. Marcus couldn't speak. Couldn't think. His entire empire was evaporating in real time, and the woman causing it looked like she was ordering coffee. His general counsel cleared his throat. We'll need time to review these documents. To verify. They're verified, Simone said calmly. I had 3 independent forensic analysts confirm the timestamps and authorship data. It's all in the packet my attorney is distributing now. She gathered her things. Looked around the table at faces that had gone pale. You have 48 hours. After that, I'm filing with the patent office. And the press. Gentlemen. She walked out like a woman who just won a war without raising her voice. The parking garage was concrete and fluorescent light, and the smell of exhaust and expensive cars. Simone walked toward her Mercedes, heels echoing in the cavernous space, mind already 3 steps ahead to the next meeting, the next move, the next. Marcus. His voice came from behind her. She stopped but didn't turn. Her hand found her key fob. Her thumb hovered over the unlock button. Not now, Marcus. Please. Just, please. 5 minutes. She could hear it in his voice. The thing she'd spent 5 years trying not to hear. Vulnerability. Real, unvarnished. The kind that came when all your armor was stripped away and you were just a man who'd made catastrophic mistakes. Against every instinct screaming at her to leave, Simone turned. Marcus stood 10 feet away. No lawyers. No board. Just him in a suit that suddenly looked too formal, too calculated, too much like costume jewelry. I was young, he said. The words came out rough. Unpolished. Scared. I made a mistake. Simone's laugh was sharp. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, Marcus. What you did was calculated. Sustained. You made a choice. Every single day. For 3 years. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you didn't figure out it was wrong until it started costing you something. He took a step closer. She didn't back away, but her spine straightened. Her shoulders squared. I've regretted it, he said quietly. Every day since you signed those papers. Every time I saw your name in the news. Every innovation you launched that I knew could have been ours. Every night I lay next to someone who wasn't you. Simone felt something crack in her chest. Something she'd cemented over with rage and ambition and 5 years of telling herself she was over him. You don't get to do this, she said, and her voice wavered. Just slightly. Just enough that he heard it. You don't get to show up and be vulnerable and human after you treated me like I was disposable. After you erased me. After you looked at me across a lawyer's table and said you didn't regret it. I lied. 2 words. Barely above a whisper. I lied because the truth was too painful. Because admitting I destroyed the best thing in my life for my father's approval felt like drowning. So I lied. To you. To myself. To everyone. Simone's hand trembled on her key fob. She hated that it trembled. Hated that after everything, his honesty still had the power to reach the parts of her she'd locked away. It doesn't change anything, she said. I know. It doesn't erase what you did. I know. It doesn't mean I forgive you. Marcus nodded. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Simone. I'm just asking you to know that I see you now. I see what I lost. And I'm sorry. For all of it. She wanted to leave. Wanted to get in her car and drive away from the man who'd broken her and the memories that still had teeth. But her feet wouldn't move. Her hand wouldn't press the unlock button. Because some part of her, the part that had loved him at 3 a.m. in that cramped apartment, still remembered what it felt like when his promises had weight. "I have to go," she finally said. She got in her car. Started the engine. Didn't look at him standing there in her rearview mirror as she drove away. But her hands shook on the steering wheel. And her eyes stung in a way that had nothing to do with the parking garage's fluorescent lights. The story broke at 6 p.m. on every major tech news outlet simultaneously. Someone had coordinated the release with the precision of a military strike. Headline: Clark Technologies CEO accused of corporate espionage. Simone was in her office when the first alert hit her phone. Then the second. Then the third. Then her phone started ringing. Journalists, board members, investors, people who'd celebrated her success yesterday and were now wondering if it was all built on theft. She opened the article. Read the accusations. Felt her world tilt. According to anonymous sources close to Callaway Technologies, Simone Clark allegedly stole proprietary code and trade secrets during her time working for the company under her former married name. Sources claim Clark used the stolen intellectual property to launch Clark Technologies, building her empire on corporate espionage and fraud. There were quotes from unnamed executives. References to ongoing legal investigations. Implications that everything she'd built was criminal. It was a lie. Comprehensive. Strategic. Designed to destroy her credibility before she could destroy Marcus's. Simone's phone rang. Her attorney. "Have you seen it?" "All of it." "It's Victoria." "Has to be." This kind of coordinated media assault doesn't happen organically. Someone with resources and connections orchestrated this. Simone leaned back in her chair. Closed her eyes. Of course it was Victoria. The woman who had everything to lose if Marcus's attention stayed fixed on someone else. The woman who'd married him for his empire and wasn't about to watch it get taken by the ex-wife who actually built it. Her email dinged. A new message. No subject line. Sender, VRS Consulting. She opened it. One line of text: drop the merger, or the criminal complaint gets filed tomorrow. Your choice. Simone read it twice. Then a third time. Her hand was steady now. Her jaw set. She'd spent 5 years building immunity to fear. To intimidation. To men and women who thought power was about who could inflict the most damage. She picked up her phone. Dialed her attorney. File everything. The patent evidence. The authorship records. The forensic reports. I want it all submitted to the patent office and the press by end of business today. Simone. Do it. If Victoria wants a war, she's about to learn something important about me. What's that? I don't lose wars. I end them. She hung up. Looked out at the city turning gold in the evening light. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably celebrating. Marcus was probably drowning in damage control. And the whole tech world was waiting to see if Simone Clark would crumble under pressure or fight back with everything she had. They were about to get their answer. Because Simone hadn't survived Marcus Callaway's betrayal just to be destroyed by his second wife's desperation. She'd survived it to prove that some people don't break when you try to bury them. They sharpen. They strategize. They rise. And they make sure everyone who underestimated them never forgets it. Think about it. When someone tries to destroy everything you've built with lies, when the person you once loved stands by and lets it happen, when your reputation is under attack and the easy choice is to walk away, what would you do? Would you surrender? Or would you fight with every piece of evidence, every truth, every ounce of power you'd earned the hard way? Because that's the question Simone was answering. Not just for herself. For every person who'd ever been erased. Every voice that had been silenced. Every genius who'd been told to work in the shadows while someone else took the spotlight. The war wasn't over. But the battle lines were drawn. And Simone Clark had never been more dangerous than when she had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Simone released everything at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not quietly. Not through back channels or carefully worded statements. She held a press conference in Clark Technologies' main auditorium with 200 journalists, 3 forensic analysts, and a display screen the size of a billboard. The evidence scrolled across it like an indictment written in code. Emails time-stamped years before Callaway Technologies was incorporated. Strategy documents in her handwriting. Lines of original algorithm design with her digital signature embedded in the metadata. Every patent Marcus had claimed. Every innovation he'd built his empire on. Every lie he'd told polished into truth by expensive PR teams. All of it hers. The journalists asked questions she prepared for. Her attorney fielded the legal angles. But it was Simone's voice, calm, measured, undeniable, that filled the room and later filled every tech news site, every business channel, every social media feed where people debated genius and theft and what justice looked like when it finally arrived. She didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Just presented facts the way you'd present quarterly earnings. Clinical. Irrefutable. This isn't about revenge, she said into a microphone that carried her words to millions. This is about correction. About ensuring that history records who actually built what. About making sure the next brilliant woman who gets told to work in the shadows knows she doesn't have to stay there. The press conference ended at 9:45. By 10, Marcus's board was in emergency session. By noon, his stock had dropped 18%. By evening, the word fraud was appearing in headlines next to his name. Public opinion flipped like a switch. The tech visionary became the tech thief. The self-made billionaire became the man who'd stolen his empire from the woman he'd married and discarded. Comment sections filled with rage, with solidarity, with people who'd seen their own work claimed by bosses and mentors and partners who took credit while they stayed invisible. Simone watched it unfold from her office. Watched Marcus's carefully constructed legacy crumble in real time. Watched the empire she'd built with her own mind finally get credited to her name. Justice tasted exactly like she'd imagined. Sharp. Satisfying. Righteous. It also tasted lonely. Because winning meant Marcus lost. And some part of her, the part that remembered 3 a.m. promises and forehead kisses and love that had felt real before ambition poisoned it, didn't celebrate the way she thought she would. She'd wanted this. Planned for it. Spent 5 years positioning every piece for exactly this moment when truth would demolish lies and power would shift back to its rightful owner. But victory felt hollow when you were drinking champagne alone in an office that suddenly felt too big, too quiet, too much like a monument to everything you'd survived instead of everything you'd wanted. Her phone buzzed. Another congratulatory message. Another investor wanting to align with the winning side. Another journalist requesting an exclusive interview. She turned off the phone. Stood at the window watching the city light up as evening settled. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably drowning. His board turning on him. His reputation in ruins. His empire, the one he'd built on her genius, crumbling like it was made of sand instead of silicon. She'd won. Completely. Devastatingly. So why did it feel like she'd lost something too? The knock came at midnight. 3 sharp raps on Simone's front door, the kind that said this couldn't wait until morning, until business hours, until a time that felt reasonable. She almost didn't answer. Almost pretended she was asleep, that she hadn't heard, that whoever was desperate enough to show up at her home uninvited could wait until daylight. But something made her walk to the door. Something made her look through the peephole. Marcus. He stood in her hallway looking nothing like the man who'd commanded boardrooms and charmed investors and built empires on stolen brilliance. No suit. Just jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. His hair was uncombed. His eyes were red-rimmed like he hadn't slept, hadn't stopped moving, hadn't figured out how to exist in a world where everyone finally knew the truth. He was holding a box. Simone opened the door. Didn't invite him in. Just stood in the threshold with her arms crossed, waiting for him to explain why he thought he had the right to be here. "I know I shouldn't have come," Marcus said. His voice was rough. Unpolished. "I know you don't want to see me. I know I don't deserve 5 minutes of your time." He looked at her then. Really looked. The way he used to before everything broke. "But I needed to give you this. Before it's too late. Before I lose the chance completely." He held out the box. Cardboard. Worn at the edges. The kind of box you keep things in that matter too much to throw away but hurt too much to look at. "What is it?" Simone's voice was careful. Guarded. "The truth. The real one. The one I should have told 5 years ago." She didn't take the box. Didn't move. Just waited. Marcus set it down on her doorstep. Opened it. Inside, yellowed paper covered in both their handwriting. Coffee-stained and creased from being folded and unfolded too many times. The original partnership agreement. The one they'd written at 3 a.m. on her kitchen table in that cramped apartment. Before investors. Before his father's ultimatums. Before Victoria. Before everything fractured into before and after. Simone's breath caught. She remembered writing this. Remembered them passing the pen back and forth, arguing over percentages and titles and what equal really meant. Remembered Marcus writing her name first. Simone Clark, co-founder and chief technology officer. 50-50 ownership. Equal decision-making power. Partners in every sense. That was the promise. That was the contract they'd made with each other before lawyers and boards and family expectations rewrote the terms. I kept it, Marcus said quietly. Hidden. Because I couldn't throw it away. Because every time I looked at it, I remembered what I'd promised you. What I'd become instead. He pulled out another document. Simone recognized the letterhead, his attorney's office. I'm calling a press conference tomorrow. I'm going to tell them everything. Not because you forced me. Not because I'm trying to save my company. But because you deserve to hear me say it publicly, with the whole world listening, that I built my empire on your genius. That every innovation, every patent, every breakthrough they credit to me belongs to you. Simone felt something crack in her chest. The same fissure that had started at his father's dinner table. The one she'd spent 5 years trying to cement over with success and strategy and carefully constructed armor. Why now? Her voice barely made it past her throat. Why not 5 years ago when it might have meant something? Marcus's eyes filled. Because losing my company taught me what I actually lost 5 years ago. It wasn't the business, Simone. It was you. It was us. It was the only partnership that ever mattered, and I destroyed it for people who didn't even love me. For approval that felt important until I realized it was worthless. He took a shaky breath. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back those 3 years where you worked in shadows while I stood in spotlights. I can't erase the divorce or the humiliation or any of it. But I can finally tell the truth. And I can do it publicly, so everyone knows that the only thing I ever built that mattered, I built it with you. Simone looked at the partnership agreement. At their handwriting tangled together on yellowed paper. At the version of them that had believed in forever. It doesn't fix anything, she said. I know. It doesn't make us okay. I know. It doesn't mean I trust you. I know. Marcus's voice broke. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to let me back into your life. I'm just asking you to let me do this one thing right. Even if it's 5 years too late. Simone stood in her doorway, holding the ghost of a promise they'd made when love felt like enough. When partnership felt possible. When they'd actually believed that two people could build something together and both get credit for it. She'd spent 5 years becoming powerful enough that she didn't need his apology. Didn't need his validation. Didn't need anything from Marcus Calloway except distance. But standing here now, looking at him broken in her hallway with their original dream in a cardboard box, she realized something. She didn't need his apology to survive. But maybe she needed to hear it to finally stop surviving and start living. Come in, she said quietly. Marcus looked up like he'd misheard. You have 5 minutes. Then you leave. And tomorrow, you tell the truth. Not for me. For every person who'll come after me. For every genius who gets told to hide so someone else can shine. Marcus nodded. Stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a sound like a choice being made. The press conference happened at 10 a.m. in the Callaway Technologies main lobby. The same place where Marcus had announced product launches, acquisition deals, and Victoria's engagement. The same place where his empire had been built on speeches and charisma and lies. Now he stood there alone. No board. No lawyers. No prepared remarks written by PR teams. Just Marcus. A microphone. And the truth. The cameras were rolling when he began. My name is Marcus Calloway. For the last 5 years, I've been credited as the founder and visionary behind Callaway Technologies. I've accepted awards. Done interviews. Been called a genius and an innovator and a self-made success story. He paused. The silence stretched. All of it was a lie. The room erupted. Questions shouted over each other. Camera flashes like lightning. But Marcus kept talking. The core technologies that built this company, the encryption algorithms, the AI security protocols, the adaptive architecture that made us billions, none of it was mine. It was created by Simone Clark, my ex-wife, my former partner, the woman I convinced to work in the shadows while I took credit in the spotlight. He pulled out documents, held them up to cameras. These are the original files. Her code, her timestamps, her digital signature. I filed patents under my name for innovations she created. I built a company on her brilliance while telling her it was temporary, that once we made it, she'd get recognition. His voice cracked. We made it. And I erased her instead. The journalists were silent now, watching a man dismantle his own legacy in real time. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to correct the record. Every innovation attributed to me belongs to Simone Clark. Every award I accepted should have her name on it. Every article that called me a visionary should have been about her. He looked directly into the camera. I stole from the woman I loved. I betrayed the only real partner I ever had. And I did it because I was a coward who valued my father's approval more than her genius. More than her trust. More than us. The room stayed quiet. Absorbing. Recording. Broadcasting his confession to millions. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down from all operational roles at Callaway Technologies. The board is free to remove me entirely. And I'm publicly supporting Simone Clark's claim to the patents that were fraudulently filed under my name. He set down the microphone. Walked off the stage. Didn't take questions. Didn't wait for applause or condemnation. Just left. The empire he'd built crumbling behind him with every step. By noon, his board had voted him out. By evening, Victoria's divorce attorney had issued a statement. By midnight, Marcus Callaway had lost control of the company that bore his name. Truth had consequences. Even for the powerful. Especially for the powerful. But something unexpected happened 3 days later. Simone called her own press conference. Stood at a podium with the same calm authority that had defined every public appearance since she built Clark Technologies from nothing. The media expected a victory lap. Expected her to twist the knife, to claim full ownership of Callaway's patents, to watch Marcus's empire burn while she stood in the warmth. Instead, she announced a merger. Clark Technologies will be acquiring majority control of Callaway Technologies, she said. The combined entity will operate as Clark Callaway Innovations. I will serve as CEO. And Marcus Callaway will remain with the company, not as chief executive, but as chief technology officer and my partner. The room erupted with questions. Shock. Confusion. Why would she save the man who'd stolen from her? Simone waited for silence. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd learned that true power wasn't about revenge. 7 years ago, Marcus Callaway and I made a promise to each other. To be equal partners. To build something together. To ensure both our names were on what we created. She paused. Let that breathe. He broke that promise. Spectacularly. And it cost me 3 years of recognition, a marriage, and the belief that partnerships could be real. Her eyes found Marcus in the back of the room. He looked like a man who'd been granted something he didn't deserve and didn't know how to accept. But I'm not interested in perpetuating cycles of erasure. I'm interested in showing what real partnership looks like. Marcus Callaway made catastrophic mistakes. He's also brilliant at translating innovation into business strategy. And he's finally learned what I knew all along, that both names matter. That credit isn't a limited resource. That you can share power without losing it. She held up a document. The merger agreement. Both their names at the top. This is what he promised me 7 years ago. Let's see if he can keep it now. The signing happened in Conference Room B. The same room where Marcus had walked in 5 years ago trying to control Simone. The same room where she told him to watch her dismantle everything he'd built. Now they sat across from each other with lawyers and witnesses and contracts that would bind their futures together in a way their marriage never had. Marcus signed first. His hand steady despite everything he'd lost to get here. Simone signed second. Her signature matching his. Equal. As they set down their pens, their hands brushed. Just for a second. Just long enough for electricity to jump between them. The same spark that had existed in that cramped apartment, that had survived betrayal and divorce and 5 years of distance. They both felt it. Neither acknowledged it. But it was there. Some things don't die when you try to bury them. They just wait. Dormant. For the moment when conditions are right to bloom again. 6 months later, they stood on a stage in front of 3,000 people at TechCon West, presenting the first innovation from Clark Calloway, a quantum encryption protocol that would redefine data security for the next decade. Simone handled the technical explanation. Marcus handled the business application. They traded the microphone back and forth with the ease of people who'd learned to share space without competition. The audience applauded. The media praised the collaboration. Investors lined up with offers that would make them both wealthier than they'd ever been alone. Backstage, after the cameras stopped rolling and the auditorium emptied, Marcus turned to Simone with something like wonder in his eyes. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." Simone looked at him. This man who'd broken her and rebuilt himself. This partner who'd finally learned what partner actually meant. "I didn't give you a second chance, Marcus. I gave myself one. The chance to work with someone who finally sees me. Who credits my work. Who understands that my name belongs on everything we build together." She smiled then. Small. Real. "You get to be part of that. But make no mistake, this isn't redemption. It's just what happens when someone finally keeps the promise they should have made 7 years ago." Marcus nodded. Understanding settling into his bones. "I'll spend the rest of my career making sure your name is first. Making sure people know that everything we create starts with your brilliance." "Good," Simone said. "Because I spent 3 years being invisible. I'm done with shadows." They stood there in the empty backstage, two people who destroyed and rebuilt and learned that sometimes the best partnerships are the ones that survive their own death. Not because the past didn't matter, but because they'd finally learned to build something where both their names fit without either one disappearing. Somewhere across the city, Victoria watched the broadcast from a penthouse that suddenly felt too big. Watched the way Marcus and Simone moved together like they were finally speaking the same language. Watched the empire she tried to destroy become something stronger. She'd lost. Completely. Not because Simone was better, but because Victoria had never understood something crucial. You can't destroy a woman who's already survived being erased. You can only remind her why she's dangerous. The story could end there. With partnership. With success. With two people finally building what they'd promised each other before ambition and fear and betrayal broke everything. But the real ending was quieter. More personal. It happened 2 months later when Simone found an envelope on her desk. No label. No return address. Just her name in handwriting she'd know anywhere. Inside, a single page. A letter. "Simone. I know I don't have the right to write this. I know that everything I say now comes 5 years too late and 1,000 apologies too few. But I need you to know something. Working with you again has reminded me what I lost. Not the company. Not the patents. Not the empire. You. Your mind. Your laughter at 3 a.m. when exhaustion made everything funny. The way you looked at me like I was someone worth believing in. The partnership that felt like home before I traded it for approval from people who didn't love me. I'm not asking you to love me again. I'm not even asking you to forgive me completely. I'm just asking you to know that every day I get to work beside you, I'm grateful. For the second chance you gave yourself. For letting me be part of what you're building. For teaching me what real partnership looks like. You were always the genius. I was just the guy lucky enough to stand next to you. I forgot that. Cost us everything to remember. I won't forget again. Marcus." Simone read it twice. Then folded it carefully. Put it in the same drawer where she kept the old photograph. The one from 7 years ago when love felt simple and promises felt permanent. She didn't respond to the letter. Didn't need to. Because some things didn't need words. They needed time. They needed proof. They needed Marcus to show her every single day that this version of partnership, equal, credited, real, was the one that would last. And maybe if he did that long enough, if he kept his promise through late nights and product launches and moments when taking credit would be easy, maybe she'd let herself believe in us again. But that was a decision for tomorrow. Or next year. or whenever her heart finally convinced her head that some people actually learn from catastrophic mistakes. For now, she had an empire to build. With her name first. With a partner who finally understood what that meant. With the kind of power that came from refusing to stay buried. And that was more than enough. So here's the question, family. The one that sits at the heart of every story about betrayal and redemption and people learning to be better than they were. What would you have done in her place? Would you have chosen revenge, watched his empire burn and walked away satisfied? Would you have chosen forgiveness, taken him back despite the years of erasure? Or would you have chosen what Simone chose? Something in between, something harder, something that required him to prove every single day that he'd changed? Drop your answer below. Because here's what I believe. The best justice isn't the one that destroys someone else. It's the one that sets you free. Sometimes the person who erased you needs to lose everything to finally see you. But by then, you've already learned to see yourself. You've already built an empire from the ashes of what they tried to burn down. You've already proven that your name belongs in lights, on patents, in boardrooms where decisions are made. And that's the power they can never touch. The power that comes from refusing to disappear. From demanding your credit. From knowing your worth even when everyone else tries to diminish it. Simone Clark learned that the hard way. Through betrayal and divorce and 5 years of building something that couldn't be taken from her. Through choosing to partner again with a man who'd stolen from her, not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to rewrite the rules. She wasn't just building an empire. She was building it on her own terms. With her name first. With a partnership that finally reflected what she'd always deserved. Equal. Credited. Seen. Thank you for watching, family. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember their own power. Someone who's been working in shadows. Someone who's been told their name doesn't matter. Someone who needs to hear that they don't have to stay invisible. Until next time, may you never shrink yourself for someone else's comfort. May you demand the credit you've earned. May you build empires that carry your name. And may you remember that the most dangerous thing you can tell someone who's trying to erase you is this. Watch me rise.